Let's get that. Yeah. Lamp. Yeah, testing. Let's do my message. Uh-oh. Connection issues. Cool. Message here. Please let me know if there are any audio lag issues. And then I'm going to do a thumbs up. Looks like my chat window froze. So can I just put this? Okay, I can. Chat window froze, but that's fine. Pin. Okay, I pin that up. Interesting. Whatever. I got my chat window frozen. Okay, anyway, hello. Welcome to the stream. Hi. I see we have Jeremy Borno is hello. It has been a while that I was in your Hangout. Cool. Well, glad to have you return. Yeah, so yep, we gotta just keep going and we'll go see how this goes. I'm always experimenting with my setup here. I'm just not a professional streamer. This is the Black Ponderer, this YouTube channel where we talk about philosophy. We have philosophical texts. Usually we commentate on that, and that's a lot of fun. We talk a lot about like old school philosophy or traditional, I guess conventional philosophy, with the snuffy texts with the Plato and the Aristotle and the Immanuel Kant and the Rene Descartes and the Jean-Paul Sartre and all that stuff. We do some of that. But then we kind of open it up. We kind of freeball it. We kind of give more of a loosey-goosey conversational hangout style here with the live streaming. And that's cool. I think immigration today has been disastrous, and it's true in Canada. Yeah, we're going to talk all about that and more here at a Black Ponderer. So that's one of our topics. It's more free-forming. So in the videos where I just talk about text, it's a little bit more lecture-y, or I try to make it conversational where I open it up to comments. Then I kind of try and do the dialogue via the comment section. But sometimes this here is the opportunity for more of just back and forth. And, I like to try and keep it more hangout style. And that's kind of based off of, I choose some of the thumbnails for the videos where it's like images of, cafes, nightclubs, lounges. Because you got to imagine like we're hanging out at like a club or a bar or a lounge, and we just talking and we just chilling. So thanks for me, it's Saturday night. I know you could be hanging out and partying it up, or like, watching Netflix or something, but instead you choose to hang out with me, and that's cool. Okay, so let's get with the topic. Even immigrants that I know who have education and experience don't get good paying because of lack of Canadian experience. Wow. And then you're saying it's stupid that my nation allows hundreds of thousands of immigrants, but they don't succeed. Well, that's Canada, yeah, I don't know how Canada. I don't, can't really speak. I'm a United States of American, and yeah, I have different opinions. As also as somebody who grew up with immigrants, some of my best friends are immigrants, and here in America, immigration is bad, but it's bad more so because of a system. Well, it's bad because of American capitalism. That's why it's bad, right? Which we could go into. We could talk about how it's less about people stealing jobs or like people like criminals coming in and causing a ruckus. It's less about that. It's more just, American powers coming into other countries and fucking it up, fucking other countries over, and then they cause all this crap that causes other countries to get messed up, and then they, the people who suffer from the imperialism of America come to the United States trying to flee that craziness, and then we have the audacity and the gall to like blame them for trying to escape the shit that America caused or like was a huge part in doing. And yeah, but we can talk more about that in the comments. But I don't know how Canada is, but maybe it might be similar, as many countries are. Okay. So, and then Borno says, this is a similar issue in the United States, so I'm fully aware. Okay. Why don't you want to talk about multiculturalism? So in case you're watching later or you hopped on and you're watching now, it's just actually a topic that was suggested by the person in the comment, Jeremy Borno, it's a viewer. And he's like, hey, why don't you talk about multiculturalism? And then I'm like, okay, what do you mean by that? And you described what you meant by multiculturalism. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like multiculturalism to me. That sounds like immigration. It sounds like you have an issue with immigration. Multicultural, that to me, that's more about just dealing with various different cultures. But you're talking about like job prospects and like economics, and I mean it kind of went beyond culture and it went to like economic issues and sociological problems, and it just really just sounded like, oh, you just want to talk about immigration. So I mean, that's how I saw it. I'm a child of immigrants, so my viewpoint is balanced and fair. Well, it just depends, right? It depends. Because, it really does. I mean, I've had conversations like that too, right? Well, where, somebody will be talking to me and they're like, well, I'm an immigrant too. I immigrated from Britain, United Kingdom to America. And I'm like, well, that's a very, very different experience than like somebody who's running from war-torn like Latin American country, right? It has to like, I mean that's a very different type of experience, right? So it depends. Just because you're an immigrant doesn't. I mean, it depends on where country you're coming from, and your experience. Because two immigrants might have very different experiences. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? I mean, I remember I was talking to somebody who was like, "Oh, I understand everything," and I'm like, "Where'd you come from?" "Oh, I came from Britain," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And the family was already well off, they were fine. In terms, they just kind of wanted to just come to America for better, as opposed. I mean, they didn't suffer from extreme poverty. They didn't suffer from like gang violence. They didn't suffer from these kinds of things that a lot of immigrants that I know, that I grew up with. Not saying maybe you did, but it's interesting because a lot of immigrants will be upset, and then it's like, well, I mean, let's talk about your personal experience, and also just because one's personal experience doesn't reflect the experience of everybody. Just like I call myself the Black Ponderer, right? But that doesn't mean I represent all of how black people think. you know, it varies depending. So, okay, your family is from Haiti. That's cool. That's cool. So yeah, Haiti is there. It's got a lot of issues right now. Haiti, yeah, it's a pretty bad scenario right there. So there's that. But we can talk about the stuff that you raised in your email. I'll bring that up. Let's see here. I will close this, and I will. And then multiculturalism is created by immigration. Oh, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Multiculturalism can also be created by colonialism, right? Or imperialism, like, which, I mean, that's multiculturalism can be created by trade, or like mercantilism is what it's called. People trading amongst each other, exchanging, like, trade is a huge thing, with the, what is it called? The Silk Road, a lot of multiculturalism there, or like, multiculturalism can be created by all types of things, right? And then, there's various levels of multiculturalism, For example, there's like queer culture, right? And so, queer culture mixing in with heteronormative culture. And within the queer community, there's various different cultures, like transgender culture, and a culture from people who identify as asexual and things like that. Various different ways of interpreting life, and then that mixes up. I know, because I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, where like there's a lot of queerness in there, and there's a lot of like that's a type of multiculturalism too, which is not caused by immigration. So it depends, right? But the thing is that most immigrants are from India, and yours are from Mexico. Immigration right now is not diverse. It's not just Mexico, right? They're traveling through Mexico, right? But they might not be Mexican. They might be like from a lot of people from El Salvador, Venezuela, like a lot of Latin American, a lot of South America too, Chile, a lot of Latin American. But it's not just that. Like there's a lot of Asian immigration going on. And when I was growing up, that was huge. And when I was a little kid, there was a lot of immigration from East European people. I remember that, where a lot of my buddies were fleeing from like East European wars, like the Bosnian War. Like I got some buddies who were like from that country who didn't even speak any English, right? They came, but they learned, right? And we became good, learned English. Yeah, that was a lot of, because the collapse of the USSR happened, and that I'm little. I mean, I'm pretty old, so I think when the USSR collapsed, I was like 4 years old. So I was going to, and the aftermath of that took several years, and there was a lot of like violence and destruction that followed that collapse, right? So there's a lot of people fleeing from Eastern Europe that came to the Bay Area, and I remember that. So there's that aspect too. But let me bring up some of your points. Let's see. Yeah, that's cool. About you're ready to come back because you were working your job, but now you're free. That's cool. Okay, and then you say like mass immigration is the issue. Latin America. So you say, yeah. Let's talk with just communicate, do a dialogue. You say most immigrants who come today to the United States are from Latin America. That's not diverse in my opinion. But you gotta stay like Latin America is extremely diverse, right? Like, I mean, there's Mexico, and then there's, like, it's not just all Mexicans, right? Or not all these Latin American countries are just like share culture from Mexico, right? I mean, all these Latin American, and there's many, right? I mean, they all have different cultures, right? Venezuelan, like what I just listed so far, El Salvador. And I know because, I mean, I'm a little aware because, that's kind of what's cool about growing up where I'm from, the San Francisco Bay Area. I have friends from like all these Latin American countries, Argentina, and now we're talking about like South American countries, and they all have these different cultures, right? I mean, similar, they share certain things, right? They all speak Spanish, but a lot of them, the dialects are like very different, right? And so they don't, like, the Spanish they speaking isn't like super similar, it's even like that kind of thing. Yeah, so I would definitely push back on that. Like, no, it's Latin America is extremely diverse, right? You don't want to like clump it all in a monolith, and so to that end, when you think about like why are people from Latin America fleeing, and that's what's going on. Like, a lot of these people are fleeing, right? They're refugees. And you gotta like think about like why is this happening? Well, it's many different reasons, right? Each of these countries have like a lot of wars that are going on, or like corruption in their governments, like extreme violence, and it depends on what country you're talking about because they're not all the same. But it's a lot of turmoil and violence and political like persecution and stuff like that. And they're all fleeing. Most of them are fleeing, particularly like the ones that I knew, who I grew up with. But I mean, that was a while ago. This is the 90s that I'm talking about. But you see this today, right? You see it today, and you see that more extreme. And it's not just political violence, all that's huge, right? But it's also like climate change is happening, right? Where people are a lot of these countries that are close to the shoreline. A lot of these Latin American countries that are islands, right? Central America and that kind of, they're fleeing because, their land is literally like being destroyed by climate change, and they don't have that infrastructure, right? Because they're underdeveloped countries and things like that. And you gotta think about like why is this happening? If we talk about climate change, is like the United States of America is one of the leading causes of climate change, right? So it's a lot of it is America's fault, right? And then you go to the political situation, and it's like, well, a lot of that is American military powers coming into these countries and like influencing these politicians that are in Latin America to like serve American interests, and which causes violence and turmoil in that country, right? And a lot of that's what's going on too. Okay, and then you say, I mentioned about cheap labor and how it affects quality of life in Canada. Nearly all the cheap workers are Indians. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. Like corporations, and yeah. So corporations, like, what's the point of a corporation is to maximize profit, right? That's the point. They're not trying to, a corporation, their job is not to be nice or kind or compassionate. They'll say these things, right? They're like, oh, we care, we're compassionate, and they'll even do like a little like showcases of, oh, we did this, we're working with United Way or some like nonprofit organization, but they just do that to for tax write-offs and shit, as maybe some people watching don't believe, like, oh no, they're genuine. No, they're they just do that. It's always about maximizing profit, so they're gonna look for the cheapest labor, right? And so you can offer these people who are desperate right, who are fleeing violence and persecution and like extreme poverty, and they're desperate, so these corporations are like, oh well, they'll take the salaries, right? They'll take these cheap salaries, right? And so like, and then the problem is, as a society, United States of America or Canada or these like developed countries, we frame the problem as like, oh, this is a problem of it's a problem because they're accepting cheap labor and that's messing. It's like, dude, like the problem isn't them. The problem is corporations. Right? That's the problem. Right? The problem is like we have these situations where like people are desperate to like that corporations takes advantage of these situations. Right? They take advantage of people by like paying people extremely like low incomes that they can't even survive off of, right? But they're just so desperate because it's like, well, I could do that here in Canada or United States, or I can stay where I'm at, where my place of origin, and get like, or die, right? Or be like tortured in some like prison camp or something, So what's really the problem here? Like, what is the issue here? Like, is it an issue of multiculturalism, or is it, or is it like the core root problem something else? I would argue it's something else, right? And then you say, we as North Americans don't have all the resources to take care of refugees. We are broke and struggling. I don't agree with that. I think we do have the resources. It's just that our society favors corporations rather than human beings, right? We definitely have the resources. Scarcity is a myth, right? I've made several videos about this idea that we have limited resources. That's just a flat out lie, right? We have resources. It's just that when you can't make money or you can't make profit off of these resources, then they're considered a waste. It's very similar to, I bring it up all the time. I work as an activist for this group. It's called Food Not Bombs. I brought it up several times. Food Not Bombs, one of the big things they do is that they collect food that would otherwise be thrown away and prepare it and cook it and then redistribute it to people who are hungry. And one of the things that Food Not Bombs always highlights is 40% of all food that's produced is just thrown away. It's just thrown away in a landfill somewhere. Like 40%. 40%. It's just huge. All that many food with, it's just thrown out. Good food, not food that's like expired or that's like, bad. Good food is just thrown out. The reason why it's thrown out is because corporations can't sell, businesses can't sell it. They can't make a profit off of them, right? That's why it's thrown out. And that's why starvation is a thing and hunger is a thing. That's why. The reason why that hunger is a thing is because corporations can't make money off of food, right? There should be no hunger. Like, we throw enough food away, like that food could be like salvaged and prepared, which I do. That's part of the work that I do. It's just so much food. Like, sometimes we'll collect food and we'll fill up our cars, and like we don't have enough space for the cars, and we have to get so many people to help haul the food. And it's really sad too when you think about it. We definitely have enough resources. That's not the problem. Like, the problem is, like, we live in a society that all we are focused on is creating capital. And we're not focused so much on, livelihood, like human beings, right? But let me see what else you put. And then you say, we are broke, we're struggling. Yeah, we are broke, we are struggling. Is refugees causing that? Is like immigrants causing that? Is like multiculturalism causing? No. We're broke and we're struggling is because money is it's because corporations are constantly like trying to figure out how to make more and more money, rather than like, maybe we should like try and actually like address the problem of people struggling. But housing, for example, the housing market is rent and mortgages are going up. People are struggling to pay for to live in a house. Like, and whose fault is that, right? It's real estate agents. Right? It's like the housing market. Like, who are setting these prices? And then you would ask like, well, they're setting the prices for a reason, right? They're evaluating them. Like, bullshit. They're just setting these prices because they're just trying to maximize profit. Meanwhile, there's like homeless people on the street. In the city of Memphis, it's interesting. In the city where I live, Memphis, Tennessee, there are more vacant houses than there are like than there are homeless people. There are more like, we have enough vacant house. We have more than enough vacant houses in the city of Memphis to house every single homeless person that's on the street. And my city deals with huge amounts of homelessness. It's like a big problem, but we have enough vacant houses. And then that's another thing. It's like, we have the resources, right? And you'll say like, well, we don't have enough houses. No, we actually do have enough houses. And it's like, well, they're not going to make money. It's like, well, they're not making money anyway, right? Because the houses are just sitting there vacant. Like, they're not making money regardless, right? So it's like, you might as well. But the thing is, like, housing corporations are like, well, I have to make money off that investment. So I'm not going to like allow somebody to live in there for free. So you're just going to allow somebody to live on the street and die and start? Yeah. This is the problem, right? This is the problem, right? This is why we're struggling. It has nothing to do with immigrants or like refugees or multiculturalism. That's what I would argue, right? And then, as much as it's true, couldn't foreigners fight their government by any means? No, right? As you see with that's just something we I can't even do that here in the United States of America, right? I mean, I do all this activist work, but I can't just say like, like, President Biden, you're out, because there's restrictions, right? It depends, and there's certain levels. I can't like speak against the government, but a lot of countries you can't do. You see, like in Russia, for instance. In Russia, like, you talk bad about the government, you'll get your ass thrown in prison, right? And and you wish you would be dead, right? I mean, they do horrible shit to you. China is another country where you can't just like, what, fuck the government. It's like, you say that and you're gone real fast, right? You can't, it's not that easy, right? And then look at all these other countries, right? Where the government just has this absolute control. Of course you could like be like, hey, I'm not going to take this anymore. But then, and that happens, right? There's a lot of people in these countries that say like, I'm not going to take, and then you see them in a ditch somewhere, or you see them in a prison for like 20 years, right? I mean, it's brutal out there. Like, so, no, it's not that easy, unfortunately. I think my country of origin, Haiti, should get its shit together. Hope you're fine with me cursing. Oh no, I curse all the time. Yeah, Haiti is really. I know they're dealing with a lot of political turmoil, and it's kind of sad because Haiti is known to be like the first enslaved country to uprise, and Haiti's an example of that. Right? They're like, we're not taking this anymore, and so they fought against their European enslavers and they won, right? But look at where Haiti is now, right? So again, it's like it's not that easy, right? It's not easy, and Haiti has been dealing with political turmoil for a long time, right? For a long time. it just goes to show you, like, it's not easy to just get a government together, right? To get authority, like government and power, like it's you know, it's not easy to do it, right? I mean, you know, it's rough, man. But but I'm not saying don't just throw in the towel. Fight against the powers that be. But that's easy for like somebody like me to say, because I kind of live in a country where I can sort of kind of do that. If I was living in like Russia, like you best believe I probably wouldn't have this channel, right? Or I'd be trying to move out of the country, right? I'd be an immigrant, right? Because freedom of speech is not free. It's not free. Eh? And then message retracted. That's fine. And then you said, what do you say about cities like LA, New York, and San Francisco with migrants sitting on the streets? It's a damn shame. And somebody who is from San Francisco, I'm from Oakland, California. So San Francisco is like a bridge. You just take a bridge away, the Bay Bridge, right? It connects the two cities together. So I've hung out in San Francisco a lot throughout my life, with partying it up in San Francisco. What a hell of a city, San Francisco. But San Francisco has migrants living on the street. It doesn't just have migrants living on the street. It has like native San Francisco's living on the street, right? It has like every motherfucker's living on the street. I'm cool with cursing. It's not just migrants, that's for damn sure. What's the problem? It's the whole shit about like San Francisco. All they give a fuck about is, I'm talking about the powers, the government, the municipal government, like mayor, district attorney. It's funny because the person that's running for a president currently, Kamala Harris, who's the vice president of the United States. She's born in Oakland. She was born in Oakland, I believe, right? That's what I heard, which is where I'm born from. That's cool. But she was a long time ago, she was district attorney of San Francisco, right? Where I lived through that. I remember she was district attorney of San Francisco, and her whole thing was like being tough on crime. So she would like lock up. That was her whole shtick. It was like then she became a attorney general of California, which is basically district attorney. It's like you're a prosecutor. You're like you prosecute for your city or your state. So she was just like, and just that focus, I argue, like that focus on criminalizing everything. Like, so San Francisco had a huge problem. It does have a huge problem with criminalizing homelessness, right? And just like, which that doesn't solve homelessness. It's like, well, we'll just throw them in prison. It's like, yeah, like that's not going to solve the problem. You got to offer people services, and you got to get people, you got to like recognize the humanity of somebody, right? You can't just like, so yeah, that San Francisco, I'm just talking about what I know. I don't know too much about LA, New York City. I know a little bit about LA because I've been there. I've never been to New York before. But yeah, I think, the lack of recognizing homeless people as human beings and like actually providing services that help, like mental health services and counseling, and like, it's not just job shit, job shit is cool. You gotta have more than that, like, because you can offer somebody a job, but they might not be able to, like, they might not have the skills, and because that's a lot of focus on that. Oh, we just give them job training skills. It's like, yeah, but what if somebody's been like traumatized their whole life? Like they're not at that point yet. Like you gotta like look at you gotta treat them as a human being first, right? You gotta like, offer them friendship before you can do that. That's all I'm saying. And San Francisco didn't do none of that, right? None of that. And that's why homelessness is a huge problem in San Francisco, because San Francisco doesn't treat homeless people like human beings. Again, it has nothing to do with immigration or like multiculturalism or anything like that. Yeah, that's the problem. what's the point of bringing mass immigrants if not for corporations? Um, yeah, it's true. Like, I mean, mass immigration happen. So what? Why? The question is like, why does mass immigration happens? And I would argue like, well, it's because they're fleeing, they're refugees most of the time, or at least like currently, that's what's going on, particularly in Latin America, from Latin America currently. But that's how it's been throughout my life. Like most these mass immigrations happen because people are fleeing turmoil. Um, and so like they're just trying to get away from violence, from extreme violence. So they get here to the United States of America. So what did they do at that point? Well, they got to get a job, right? You got to find some way to support themselves, right? And so they need money, and so corporations sweep in. And say like, hey, we'll offer you this wage. We'll offer you $20,000 a year, which in the United States of America, you can't like live off of $20,000 a year. But a lot of these, that's the jobs that they're being offered, right? That's the salaries they're being offered. So what I'm saying is like, your question, what is the point of mass? Like corporations, like So I don't know. That's kind of a weird question, or like. Mass immigration happens because people are fleeing from extreme crisis, and corporations exploit that. They exploit that, right? So yeah, that's what's going on. Like, and then and the next thing you say, we don't need foreigners working in Uber and fast food. They should be young adults and teenagers. Right, but that's all they can get. That's all they get. I mean, you should tell that to the corporation. You should tell that to Uber and McDonald's and stuff. But they're not going to listen to you. But I don't know. I think like that's kind of beside the point, or like I think that's kind of a what do they call that? A red herring, or like a straw man or something. Like I think you're kind of missing the point of like what's going on. The fact of the matter is, when a foreigner gets here and they've just escaped from like gang violence, extreme gang, or like horrible like political persecution, they're like, okay, I need money now, so I'm just gonna get any job I could get. Right? So they're just gonna, they're in a desperate ass situation, so they're gonna take the Uber or the fast food job. I mean, I don't know how other way to frame that. That makes, I mean, so it kind of makes sense to me. So what is the issue? The thing is, like, young adults, teenagers, they usually don't want those jobs anyway, right? So, because they got kind of a luxury. So, okay, then you're saying, let me see if I'm missing. Okay, so just checking this out. You have to consider other immigrants who try to assimilate and make something of themselves. They may dislike mass immigration too. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. No, that's definitely a thing that happens. It's just like it just depends on the person. I'm just saying my point of view, and I don't speak for all immigrants, and all immigrants don't speak for all immigrants. I mean, it's very similar to like a black person that votes for Donald Trump, like, which is like absurd to me. I also, yeah, I mean that's a phenomenon. I mean that we could just like go in extreme depth about, like, I mean this is a phenomenon, like, or like. There's like queer people who don't like transgender people, like a gay man that doesn't like trans, like, I mean, that kind of phenomenon happens. But yeah, I've definitely talked to some immigrants who are like not really for immigration. but I think maybe they drank the Kool-Aid a little bit too much. They kind of bought into, now I'm speaking from my own country. I think they bought the American dream mythos a little too much, right? I don't know, but let me see. You got something. The issue now is that we, the Westerners, have always been accepting and tolerant, and we are abused by our politician. Well, that's not true as well, right? Westerners have absolutely not been always been accepting. And that's been true throughout American history, at least, right? I mean, shit. That ain't. I mean, in Canada, you hear about like I hear about all your problematic history with Native Indigenous peoples, right? And how they set up all these, the first European colonists that settled in Canada were like, yeah, no, fuck that, fuck this Native American. We're gonna set up European schools, and we're gonna force you to learn our ways, and we're going to like erase your entire culture, and if you dare try to practice your own culture, we'll like flog you until you stop doing it, or we'll abuse the shit out of you, and eventually like you'll get with the program or you'll die, right? I don't know, I wouldn't call that acceptance. Right? And it's the same thing here in America, right? People like racism is huge, and pressure to like adopt like European white supremacist values. I mean that's like, yeah, no, we're not accepting. I wish we were very accepting, but we're not. And it isn't just the politicians, although since the politicians have the power, right, they're the ones who are able to enforce their will because they have so much power. But Westerners have a long history of not being accepting, right? which is sad. It's sad. Other countries limit immigration rates because they are intelligent, but our politicians are stupid. First of all, yeah, some are stupid. A lot of them are stupid. That's true. A lot of politicians are stupid. Some are just like flat out evil, right? They're just like, they're selfish and they're greedy, extremely greedy, and they know exactly what's up. They're not stupid. They're just like, hey, I only give a fuck about myself and fuck everybody else, right? So there's stupidity there, but some of that is greed. But yeah, like focusing on limiting immigration rates, like, see, to me, like, that's not the problem. See, but when you do that, what you're doing is you're ignoring the root cause. And you're basically saying, like, yeah, the problem that you're dealing with, fuck that. I don't care. And it's like, I mean, I would ask, like, okay, why are you so desperately fleeing your own country of origin to here? Like, why are you doing that? Right? And of course, you get different answers, right? Some people are like, well, I'm just trying to get a better job. You see that. But if you're talking about like these people who are Uber drivers and they're working at fast food place, that's not what they're doing, right? They're fleeing. And so if they're saying like, hey, dude, like if I stayed at my country, I would have been killed, right? Then we have to be like, okay, why is that happening? Like, why is that happening? And you might say like, well, that's not my problem. But the thing is, like, at least in the United States of America, that is the government, the United States government directly is involved in the reason why that happens, right? And a lot of people don't want to go there. They don't want to think about that. They don't want to talk about that. CIA sending like military operatives over to influence governments, Latin American governments, so they can like steal the resources, like, and then so they prop up like corrupt politicians. And there's like a whole history of this that's like recorded. I mean, you can look all this shit up, right? It's not even a secret anymore. Like, even like the CIA and FBI, they admit, like, yeah, we did it. Right? Just like they tap Martin Luther King Jr.'s, like, they wiretap his, I mean, it's that kind of stuff that goes on that causes like a lot of these mass immigrations to happen, right? And so rather than focusing on like, oh, we need to limit immigration, we should be like asking like, what the fuck is our government doing to cause all this crap to happen that causes this? Like, that's what we should be like asking ourselves. Instead of like, oh, I don't want to, like, we got to get to the core root cause, right? But then when we start, if we do that, then we're gonna have to start like thinking about, oh, okay, maybe I'm not like an innocent party in this. Maybe I'm, fucked up. Maybe the company that I work for is doing like all this shady ass shit, and maybe I should like question like me working for this company. You gotta start thinking like you start having those difficult conversations with yourself. But people don't want to do that, right? And it's I don't know. I think it's like an evasion, and I think that's what immigration really is about, right? And then let's see. And then you say, we Canadians are too liberal and woke to ignore the First Nations, and we acknowledge them 24/7. I'm sure they themselves would have problems with mass immigration. To awoke to ignore First Nations, and we acknowledge them 24/7. Yeah, but why is like Native peoples, like some of the most poverty-stricken people in Canada, and then you might, I would say this is more ignorance. They're like, well, they're just not trying hard enough. It's like, I don't buy that, because I could speak for the United States of America, like, the indigenous Americans are, some of the most poverty-stricken people in America, because the American powers have not, are constantly taking away. They're still taking away their land. Like, they're trying to build this. They're struggling with building, the whole like pipeline that connects Canadian oil to American oil, and then they're trying to connect it through Mexico to Mexico too. Is like a pipeline that all these like gas corporations are trying to establish from Canada through the United States into Mexico, right? And it's going straight through the land of indigenous people, and they don't give us, these people don't care. And so, like, if you don't have a place to reside, how can you like escape poverty? And right, of course, with these pipelines, they create all this pollution, right? There's all this pollution, and it's right on top of the indigenous land, right, or the lands of natives peoples. And there's constant people protesting this, including indigenous people, but these corporations don't listen to them. And you don't hear a lot of that because it's not, the mass media doesn't want you to see that. But just going to like want to check out some of these like media organizations that are like quote unquote woke, like Democracy Now! Or The Intercept, or like all these or even stuff like PBS, right? Or like, what is, I forgot what Canada's is, their public broadcasting channel. But they show a lot of that, and then the counters to that, it's like, oh, these things are woke, and it's like, no, they're just showing the truth, right? But so I don't know. I don't really buy that, to be completely honest with you. Are you truly for open borders? I don't know. I think borders cause more harm than good. I just don't like the fact that borders are kind of like this thing where people who need help cross, and then the people who can provide help are just like giving the middle finger. It's like, yeah, I'm not down for that. I'm not down for that. And then the argument is like, well, we're struggling too. It's like, well, I mean, but do you have a heart? Like, do you have compassion? Maybe it's okay to struggle if you're helping your common man. I mean, I don't know. I think we should sacrifice a little bit, so like, hey, you know what? This person's trying to escape war and rape and torture, and like they're trying to have a lot, like, maybe I don't have to buy a big house, maybe I can like help this person. I don't know, I like to think, and borders kind of, that kind of like, well, you stay over there and I'm over here, and it's like, I don't like it. I think it's not compassionate. I think it's like inconsiderate and inhumane to like have that kind of way of thinking. And I think that's a huge reason why, the human race is like, so far gone in terms of like, why are we like as a human species so jacked up? It's because we just stopped caring about each other. Like, we stopped giving a fuck about each other. It's like, when did this happen? But I guess it's always been the case, right? But I just call it like it is. I don't know, when people even use that word woke as an insult, to me that's kind of like, wow, so kindness and compassion, like that's just something you don't care about, huh? Recognizing the humanity of somebody is just something like you just don't want to think about, right? That's the way I hear it when people are like, well, these people are woke. It's like, I don't know. Maybe it's the Christian in me, because Jesus said, love the foreigner. Jesus said, God said that, right? I believe he said that in Exodus, right? The quote is like, love the foreigner, right? Because you were once a foreigner. he said this. But some of the people who hate foreigners the most are the Christians. Isn't that funny? Isn't that ironic? Even though that's directly what it just blows my mind. And then Jeremy Borno says, I'm not for it. I don't see the possibility of speaking to foreigners who don't either speak English or French and have the ultra-conservative and traditional belief. So I don't see the possibility of speaking to foreigners who don't either and have ultra-conservative and traditional. Oh, okay. Do they have ultra-conservative or traditional beliefs? Yeah, I don't know your experience. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the ultra-conservative and traditional beliefs. Are you saying they have that, or are you saying you have that? Because I'm definitely not into ultra conservative and traditional beliefs. But I will say, like, so as a kid growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area during the 90s, I made friends, and then I see you saying like Islam. Some of my best friends growing up as a little boy were people from Latin American countries, Asian countries. I'm talking about like, not just Mexico, the ones I listed before, Venezuela, El Salvador, Nicaragua, those Central American countries as well. And then Vietnam, Laos. I know people from Thailand, Cambodia, right? And European countries like Bosnia and Czechoslovakia. I'm not even sure. A lot of these countries don't even exist anymore. So I don't even. Czechoslovakia and Islam. Like I know people from some of my best friends who from Yemen, right? None of these people, when they first immigrated, they didn't know how to speak English at all, like zero. But then, in our public school system, they had, and my school system was lousy. Like, I went to a horrible, highly underfunded public school system. I grew up in the ghetto, in the streets, boys in the hood type of, if you've seen them, that's kind of where I grew up, that kind of environment. But they did have like an English, second language program. And these people, like these little kids that I grew up with, they learned English. I don't know how the hell they did it. Like, I don't even know English. I know, I could speak English, but like, as I'm speaking now, like I'm constantly making grammatical mistakes and shit. These kids, they all learned how to speak, and then I became friends with a lot of these people. I didn't learn their language; they learned that because they're in survival mode. That's what I'm saying. Like when you're in survival mode, you'll pick up skills real quick, right? But they got with the program real, because they had to, right? They learned English, and and they came from like really traditional backgrounds, like Islam, like a lot of the Latin American machismo and all that shit, and a lot of these East Asian countries has a lot of that kind of traditional values too. But as we became friends with each other and grew up together and started becoming human with each other, we realized like, maybe we should give up a lot of that traditional shit, And a lot of those people, that I'm still friends with to this day, that we're all grown ups now, they abandoned a lot of that. They're like, the whole queer hate, which a lot of them are like, no, fuck that. I'm not, and it's really fascinating because, it's just so funny because, the Trump eras, particularly like during the pandemic, when the lockdown happened, you started really seeing people's true colors, right? And, a lot of people that I grew up with who were not foreigners, who were not immigrants, fellow black people, they started like getting all conservative all of a sudden. I'm like, what the fuck? Meanwhile, like the immigrants that I grew up with, they were all like, wow, we need to like really get into this whole like woke thing. They hopped on board with we gotta really get like far left. And a lot of like my immigrant friends who are now like, speak English perfectly and they got jobs, good jobs and stuff, they are like, activists now. But a lot of the people that I grew up with who were born and raised here in this country, some of those people became alt-right. I had to cut ties with them. Unfortunately, they started getting it all like speaking that kind of language, like, oh, like we don't need foreigners here. It's like, what are you talking about? We grew up with these people. Like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? It's just like, a lot of that just came out of nowhere. You saw that a lot with when that far right started really getting popular again during the Trump era. People started like showing their true color. You started hearing racism and shit, and from like people of color, which is like very strange, very strange. Some immigrants don't bother to learn English, I'm sure. Some Americans don't bother to learn English, right? Like, their English is so poor, right? Yeah. But you gotta look at like, that this is why statistics is so important, right? You gotta look at like trend lines, and you gotta look like the overall picture, the big picture. Just because some doesn't mean all, right? And you gotta look at like, okay, what's happening, right? And again, like, I don't know your experience, but I would push you to like kind of like, think outside your experience and be like, okay, what's going on overall? Not even just in Canada, just like the world generally. Because the way I see it is like, for the most part, like most immigrants learn the language eventually because they have to, right? It's like survival, like they have to, right? Some don't, it's true. I do know some Spanish speakers who took Spanish in high school and they failed. This is like high school Spanish, so it's for people like me who grew up speaking English, so that you just learn your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s and stuff, and they fail. Right? And that's not like stupidity, that's just laziness. That's like, I just don't care, right? So I hear you. Some don't, but most of those people did. Most Spanish speakers like, hey, this is an easy A for me. I can, so I don't know. Again, good that they abandoned the right-wing beliefs. I think the whole world should free itself from outdated beliefs. Yeah, that'll be nice. I mean, if you watch my channel, that's what I'm all about. The outdated. It just depends on what you're talking about by outdated. Because I'm really like far left. So in terms of like outdated belief, like, I kind of king, I'm like third wave feminism, right? Like, like we need to stop thinking about the binary, like the sex binary, and just start like, what about non-binary? Start like, I'm like all that type of outside box type of thinking, or like, when you say like you don't believe in borders, like, yeah, we should start thinking like that, like, nations, states, are these really good ideas? Let's question these things, right? Yeah, so at least like question them, right? At least like have critical conversations about them. We don't even do that, right? No liberal or progressive ideas can coexist in patriarchal countries like Nicaragua, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China. They can, and they have. It just so happens like nowadays, like, you have all these right-wing authoritarian regimes running these countries. But, for example, Saudi Arabia, I was just reading this article the other day that talked about how, you just got to you got to research it. So, queerness was not explicitly rejected by Islam. I'll, if you want to know the quote, or you want to know this article I was reading, I can quote it to you if you want the direct article. But you probably could just like Google it or something. And there's plenty of history of that. It's talking about how Islam didn't overtly reject like queerness, like that wasn't a thing that it overtly did. That only happened, like the whole forceful like implementation of the patriarchal system only really truly started to occur when European colonists and settlers came into Middle Eastern countries and kind of enforced that way of thinking onto them, and then they adopted that. It was like a European way of thinking that the Middle Easterns sort of like adopted as part of the way they can implement power. So it wasn't always like that. It was and that's true for like a lot of these other countries, right? China. Like if you actually look at the history of these countries, like it wasn't always the case. And sometimes, and also when you look at these countries today, like you'll see like a lot of leftists or like non-traditional like activists working in these countries. It's just like these extremely powerful, patriarchal, authoritarian governments are just cracking down hard on these people. And it's not only that, like a lot of these activist groups they reach some success, but the media is controlled by a lot of these governments, and they don't show you a lot of that. That's what's happening, right? So I don't know. And then you paint me as if I'm ignorant. I know what I'm talking about. Okay. I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. I apologize, but I think I think you do know what you're talking about. I think I think you know what you're talking about. But I will say, I think like some of those points I would disagree strongly with. I'm just saying, like, I would disagree strongly with a lot of these points. Like I don't equate multiculturalism with immigration. I think these are two separate things. I also think, like, when people say that, and I'm not saying you're ignorant, I'm just saying, like, this is a common thing that happens where people are like, the problem is there's just too many different cultures integrating with each other, and that's the problem. It's like, no, that's not the problem. Like, the problem is you're getting people that are like fleeing horrible situations, coming here for a better life, and we're just giving them the middle finger. And on top of that, like, a lot of the reason why their horrible situations are caused by our governments. So we have some responsibility too as the citizens of those governments to be like, oh, okay, wait a minute, like, let's do something about that. And so it's a lot of like kind of read the root cause analysis. And then you say employers hiring foreign temp workers for cheap labor. Employers do that, and I think that's more of a problem with corporations. That's their fault. That's not the refugees' fault. The price increase of rent, food, and gas. Yeah, no, that's a problem with capitalism, like that. I mean, should there even be rent? And like what you're saying, like conservative traditional beliefs, like rent. I would argue rent is a conservative traditional belief. Right? It's like, well, then some people will clap back and say like, oh, well, who's gonna pay for the maintenance of the building, and like, who's gonna maintain the property? It costs money to build the structure. It's like, come on now, really? Like, you think these absorbent prices, like, does it take that much money to maintain a building? I mean, it takes. It's not free to maintain a building, surely, but like, they were maintaining that damn building when the rent was much lower. I'll say that. What's going on here? Like, somebody's pulling a fast one on us. Same thing with food. Like, dude, food is free. Like, I can get free food. Like, I mean, just join a Food Not Bombs group. 40% of all food is thrown out. Like, I mean, there's no reason why food should be this expensive. Gas too. It's like, we shouldn't even be using gas. Like, we should be using like electric power vehicle, but I mean, we could go. I mean, so what I'm saying is like, the way the issues are being framed is like, is not addressing the root cause or the core issues, right? And it really has nothing to do with immigration, but it's sad because, and so immigrants are punished. Like, they're like, they're already fleeing these horrible situations, and then we put all this other crap, this blame on them that they have nothing to do with, right? And then, I'll say that, and then they'll be like, well, at the end of the day, like, I'm the one that's struggling here. What about me? I have to make ends meet. It's like, dude, like, at a certain point, you gotta be like, are we human beings or not? Like, who do we care about more, right? Do we care about our common man or not? It's like, well, I do, but I also gotta survive. It's like, well, then we need to like focus on who's actually causing the problem, because it's not immigrants. If that's what you're concerned about, like, I mean, the first person that's causing the issue is like, the way we're thinking about the problem. Like, that's causing the issue too. I don't know. That's what I would argue. And then I'm just looking at your email here. Refugees living in cities, fake diversity, because in Canada, where I'm from, it's mostly Indians who make up the majority. Oh, you're talking about people from India. Okay. Clearly in America, immigration is a polarizing topic for you Americans too, but here in Canada it's sickening because we don't have enough money to afford housing and groceries, right? So in Canada, you don't have enough money to afford housing and groceries, and like, so immigrants are the reason why that's the case. You're like that's the problem. The immigrants are making that happen? No. The reason why you don't have enough money to afford housing is because of like the housing market, right? That's why, like, or like real estate agents, right? Like, it's the people who own the houses and selling them. Like, that's the issue. You need to take your grievances to them, not these immigrants. Or like groceries. It's like, well, let's talk to like some of these grocers, like some of these big chain grocers. They're like, let's talk about like factory farming and like the agricultural corporations. Like, that's where we need to be taking our grievances to. Like, immigrants have nothing to do with that. Like, let's go to foster farms. Be like, foster farms, y'all need to stop like spending so much, increasing the money so much that we the cost of the food. And of course, they're just like, they might, you might clap back and say like, well, there's a reason. No, there's no reason. Like, the reason why they're increasing the cost of the food because it costs more to generate the food. Like, bullshit. Not when like 40% of food is being thrown away. Right? They're raising the cost of food because they can. They're just getting away with it, and they're like taking advantage of like refugees by like, hey, we're not going to pay like these Canadians who are born here. Like that's too much. We'll pay, but we'll pay you because you got to take it, right? Because you either take that or you stay in your country and get executed by your government. Right? So I mean, that's what we need to be talking about here, right? That's what we need to be talking about here. I want to discuss multiculturalism. It is always peaceful why some countries like collapsing Canada allow immigrants. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know enough about Canada to know that if it's actually collapsing. In America, like America is not collapsing because of immigration, right? That's like a picture that Fox News paints. Like, oh no, like these immigrants are destroying society. It's like that's not why society is being destroyed. Like society is being destroyed because like I've been saying, right? Because corporations are like nickeling, diming us all the time, and plus we're like, the American government is spending so much money on war and shit, and they're not spending any of that money on like welfare and livelihood of its citizens. So, but I don't know how Canada is. I can only speak for this. But I would guess I would like to, I would probably bet money that it's probably a similar situation. Do immigrants truly work harder than citizens? No, right? They work. It's the same, right? It's just the same, right? It's the same, right? Which is to say, like, okay, so if y'all both working the same, who's really at fault here? Is it the immigrant? Is it the citizen? No, it's these the people who are in power. Like it's their. That's the problem. How can citizens and immigrants get along culturally speaking? By like doing some root cause analysis and looking at the actual cause of the problem, which again are like corrupt governments and greedy ass corporations. Like, then we can get along very nicely at that point, right? But if we're all like arguing with each other, particularly like citizens calling foreigners like being xenophobic and shit, like that's not going to solve anything. I don't know. Just maybe this is more of a rant, but I don't know. That's what What far left solutions do you propose to fix the issue at large? Well, let's just get rid of capitalism. Like we got to be realistic here. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? But how do you implement them? Now, I guess it's more the question, right? I mean, obvious things like healthcare should be completely free, education should be housing should be completely free. But you're like, well, okay, but how do you like actually make that a reality in the world we live in today? Which is reasonable. Like, okay, that's some pie in the sky type of shit. But that's where my mind's going. I think the first thing we gotta do is we gotta stop like misinterpreting the problems that we face in our society, and that's what one of the cool. This is why I think philosophy is so important, right? Philosophy allows us to because that's one issue, like immigration. Like people, like we think about immigration in this, it's so incorrect the way we think about immigration, and like how like the way we frame the problem of immigration is so like not like the reality of the situation, right? And so I think so one solution is actually looking at problems like immigration and like saying, okay, what are the actual root cause issues, right? Because who's doing that? Nobody, especially our government. They're not doing that shit at all. And you can keep going with immigrate. You can do the same thing with climate change. You could do the same thing with like crime. Because crime is a huge thing here, and like, oh no, people were getting shot left and right. Here, as you know, here in America, we got a problem with school shootings. And nobody's talking about. Well, people are talking about it, but the people in power don't want to hear it. Right? It's like, well, why is this actually happening? Well, maybe it's because we have this weird ass fetish with guns that we kind of just need to get some help with. It's a sick perversion, obsession with firearms, and it's really like it's sick. It's like this is mental, right? And it's pushed on us because guns are big business. And so we gotta that's just another example of like we should start there. We should start there with conversations like this. Is what I'm saying. It's like, so yeah. So how should we fix the problem? We gotta hold our government accountable. We gotta say like, look, we know what you're doing. CIA, FBI, I mean Henry Kissinger and shit. Like he did all this crap. But all the presidents, administrations here in America are guilty of this. We know what you're doing. You're sending military operatives into these countries, and then you are propping up these corrupt government powers in those countries, so that we can have some control. American can have control in that country, so we can tap into their resources. Right, and get into their capital, and that's causing extreme poverty, violence, and just people aren't able to live in their countries anymore. And we just need to, and that's why immigration is happening. And then we just, as a citizenry, we have to like be more vocal about that and be united in that front and be like, hey, this shit got to stop. Like, well, these immigrants are taking our jobs. It's like, it has nothing to do with that. You're the problem, right? And if you don't fix it, we're going to, like, take away your power, right? That's how you solve the problem. That's how you fix this. But a lot of people are in the dark, and they're not thinking about these problems philosophically, right? What do I mean philosophically? They're not really truly understanding the meaning of the problem. Like what I said earlier about how, like, well, if you really start digging deep into like why immigration is a problem, is because like corporations are like in these countries, like taking away resources and creating these extremely precarious situations. And some of those corporations maybe you work for, right? And it's not just like Lockheed Martin and like all these weapons corporations. It could be like McDonald's or like basically any company. Walmart could be Target. You might be like, oh shit, right. Well, maybe I need to like change some of the shit that I'm doing, right? And then you gotta kind of step up to the plate, right? Gotta step up to the plate, because then it's like, well, because I understand the pain. I understand the issue of like, look, man, I'm struggling. I'm trying to pay these bills. I gotta make rent. I gotta pay my mortgage. It's like, okay, but still, like, you can still do something. You can work for an activist group. There's some things that you could do. Maybe you could at least. Maybe you can't do that. Maybe you don't have any time, but you can still speak out. You could be like, yeah, that's xenophobic bullshit. I'm not hearing it. I'm not here for that. That doesn't take any time, right? In fact, that saves you time, right? Because, you could do that. More people need to start doing that kind of stuff, right? That's all I'm saying. I had another idea and it just slipped my mind right quick. Let me see if I can get it. Can that idea come to me? Oh well, it's gone. But I guess that we will close here. At this moment, yeah, it's been like over an hour now, so that's cool. So yeah, in conclusion, I'm really like, I hate when that happens, when I think about something and then it slips in my mind. But I guess I'll just have to let it go. And give my farewell conversation. Let's see if sometimes I'll miss a comment. I don't think I did though. Cool. Okay, so I just want to thank those who watched, and and also I acknowledge people who watch later. And if you want to, who the video has been recorded and you watch already and you make comments on these videos, that's cool too. No problem with that. And also people who just watch live and they don't say anything, the lurkers is what you. That's cool. Thanks for hanging out with me instead of like going out and partying on the Saturday night. This is my party. Yeah, so thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll be having another conversation. Let me think. Am I busy? I might be too busy. Yeah, I think next week I'm going to be doing stuff. So it'll probably be, and the next live stream will probably be 2 weeks from now. Yeah. But if nobody has any comments, I will see y'all later. Thanks for tuning in. You've been watching the Black Ponderer. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.